At first glance, it looks like the same moment: raised voices, a tense stare, a disagreement that refuses to die quietly. But look closer and you'll notice something fascinating. In America, the energy rises fast. Words sharpen. Authority is challenged head-on. In Britain, the temperature drops. Voices lower, faces stiffen. And somehow, the calm feels louder than the shouting ever could. This is the cultural fault line that keeps shocking the world. When American brutality, not always physical but often verbal, emotional, and confrontational, crashes straight into British calmness. And the clash is never subtle. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. It starts small. A cue disagreement, a student talking back to a teacher, a customer unhappy with service. In the US, directness is often praised. Say what you mean. Stand your ground. Don't let anyone walk over you. Assertiveness isn't just accepted, it's encouraged. From childhood, many Americans are taught that confidence means speaking up, even if it makes others uncomfortable. In Britain, that same moment plays out very differently. The conflict still exists, but it's wrapped in restraint. Words are chosen carefully. Sarcasm replaces shouting. Disapproval is expressed through silence, raised eyebrows, or a polite sentence that sounds harmless but cuts deeper than yelling ever could. Calmness isn't weakness here. It's control. Now put these two reactions in the same space, and things get tense fast. Imagine an American student newly arrived in a British school. Back home, questioning rules is normal. Challenging authority can even earn respect. So when a teacher enforces a rule that feels unfair, the student pushes back. Firmly, loudly, confidently. In their mind, they're standing up for themselves. But in that British classroom, the response is instant and cold. The room goes quiet. The teacher doesn't raise their voice. They don't argue. They simply pause, look, and respond calmly, almost softly. The power dynamic shifts in a way the student didn't expect. No shouting match, no back and forth. Just consequences delivered with composure. That's often the moment Americans describe as unsettling. Not because they lost the argument, but because they never got to fight it. This pattern repeats everywhere. Public transport, customer service desks, university campuses, even social gatherings. Americans tend to externalize frustration. Brits internalize it. One culture releases pressure through confrontation. The other absorbs it, stores it, and releases it later through rules, procedures, or quiet judgment. And this is where the word brutality often enters the conversation. Not necessarily violence, but intensity, emotional force, verbal bluntness, a readiness to escalate rather than de-escalate. To many outside observers, American reactions can feel excessive, too loud, too fast, too aggressive for the situation. To Americans, British calmness can feel passive-aggressive, evasive, or even dishonest. Why not just say what you mean? Why hide anger behind politeness? Why pretend everything's fine when it clearly isn't? Both sides walk away confused. Both think the other handled it poorly. History explains a lot of this. American culture was shaped by revolution, expansion, and individualism. Speaking up wasn't just encouraged. It was survival. Rights had to be demanded. Authority had to be challenged. Silence often meant submission. Over time, that created a culture where forcefulness became associated with freedom. British culture, on the other hand, evolved under centuries of hierarchy, tradition, and social order. Stability depended on restraint. Emotional control wasn't repression, it was responsibility. Keeping calm wasn't about avoiding conflict, but managing it without chaos. Fast forward to today, and those instincts are still alive. Watch how disagreements unfold online. Americans tend to debate openly, passionately, sometimes aggressively. Brits often respond with dry humor, understatement, or a single sentence that quietly dismantles the argument. One side floods the room with noise, the other drains it of oxygen. The clash becomes even more obvious in authority-based situations. In the US, questioning police instructions, school policies, or workplace decisions is relatively normalized. There's an expectation of explanation, of dialogue, of negotiation. In Britain, compliance comes first, discussion later, if at all. Calm cooperation is seen as maturity. Resistance, even verbal, can be seen as disorderly. So when Americans bring their confrontational confidence into British systems, it can feel like brutality to locals, not because it's violent, but because it disrupts the social rhythm. It breaks an unspoken agreement. Keep things measured, even when emotions run high. And yet, British calmness isn't always peaceful. It can be icy, it can be ruthless in its own way. Consequences arrive quietly but firmly. You won't be shouted at, you'll be removed, excluded, or disciplined without drama. By the time you realize what happened, the decision is already final. That's why so many Americans describe British authority as cold or unforgiving. There's no emotional release, no argument to win, just a calm system closing its doors. This contrast also plays out in everyday conversations. Americans often use emphasis, volume, and expressive language to show sincerity. Brits rely on tone, timing, and understatement. An American saying, "I'm really upset," might sound dramatic to a Brit. A Brit saying, "I'm not thrilled," might mean they're furious. When these signals are misread, conflict escalates. An American thinks the Brit doesn't care. The Brit thinks the American is overreacting. Neither is wrong, they're just speaking different emotional languages. What makes this clash so fascinating is that both approaches have strengths and serious flaws. American directness can bring problems into the open quickly. Issues are addressed, not buried. But it can also overwhelm situations that require patience and subtlety. British calmness can prevent chaos and maintain order, but it can also suppress emotions until resentment builds silently. When these two cultures collide, neither side adjusts fast enough. Americans push harder, feeling ignored. Brits pull back further, feeling invaded. And suddenly, a small disagreement becomes a cultural standoff. The internet has made this clash global. Videos of Americans reacting loudly in British settings often go viral, framed as entitlement or aggression. Clips of British calm responses are praised as classy or superior. But reverse the framing, and you'll see Americans applauding honesty and Brits being criticized for emotional distance. The truth sits somewhere in between. Neither brutality nor calmness is inherently better. What matters is context and understanding. When force meets restraint, the one who adapts usually wins, not by overpowering the other, but by reading the room. And that's the lesson many only learn after things go wrong. Americans who thrive in Britain often say the same thing: lower the volume, slow the response, let silence work for you. Brits navigating American spaces learn the opposite: speak up sooner, be clearer, don't assume restraint will be understood. But when neither side adjusts, the clash becomes inevitable. So the next time you see an argument spiral out of control, or shut down so quietly it feels unsettling, ask yourself this: is this really about the issue, or about two cultures handling tension in completely different ways? Because sometimes, what looks like brutality is just unfamiliar honesty. And sometimes, what looks like calmness is power wearing a very polite mask. Now I want to hear from you. When force meets restraint, who do you think handles conflict better? American intensity or British calmness? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this debate is far from settled. And just when you think you understand the clash between American intensity and British calmness, there's another layer most people completely miss. Because when things truly go wrong, when pressure is real and stakes are high, the reactions flip in ways that surprise everyone. In moments of sudden crisis, Americans often act first and process later. There's urgency, movement, loud coordination. People step forward instinctively, sometimes forcefully, believing that doing something, anything, is better than standing still. To Americans, hesitation can feel like failure. Brits, on the other hand, tend to pause, assess, observe. Even in chaos, there's a visible effort to maintain order. Instructions are followed quietly. Lines form naturally. Emotions are restrained, not because they aren't there, but because showing them feels irresponsible in public. This difference becomes especially clear in workplaces. An American employee who feels disrespected might confront their manager directly, demand clarification, or escalate the issue immediately. In Britain, that same frustration is more likely to be documented, discussed privately, or expressed through formal channels. The response is slower, but often more permanent. Americans sometimes mistake that delay for weakness. But then comes the shock. While the American is still arguing their case, the British system has already decided. Calm doesn't mean indecision. It often means the outcome is already set. Socially, the contrast can be even more brutal. In American culture, loud disagreement doesn't always end relationships. Friends argue, voices rise, feelings spill out, and then people move on.